Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're good. I'm Jack Chew. This is 12:30's Chewing It Over. We come in here daily on weekdays, and we're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, where else? Instagram, everywhere. Twitch. Not that we get many people other than sort of random gamer trolls on Twitch, but one day we'll have something useful come from there. But yeah, one of the things I got today was a message from someone saying, "Why haven't you posted what you're going to be chewing over today?" And sometimes, like today, the reason I haven't posted that out on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, or asked people for questions and stuff, is because I don't know until like 2 minutes before what we're deciding to chew over today. And so that's what happens. If you've not spotted from me an hour before or something that I tell you what's going to be on, it means there's probably not a guest on the show, because that's something I would have typically announced. And then often it's because I haven't thought of what we're going to do. But then this is one that I've been meaning to talk about for a little while, because it's a theme that I've noticed in clinic, as well as something that I've noticed journalists get in touch with me about. I spoke to one this morning from the Times about working from home, standing desks and stuff. And then I realized that generally that is a really relevant way in which the world has changed, isn't it? And I can't be the only one that's noticed it. So it's kind of this clinical interest, as well as then media interest in it. And then sometimes that means that old myths will perpetuate around what that means. As well as then there's some positives that could also come from people being more thoughtful and people being bothered about it. So today we're talking about and chewing over working from home and the pains that can come from that, and how it's affected things in the musculoskeletal space. We can then think about how that might affect things, on a public health level, exercise amounts, that sort of stuff, sedentary behaviors, that sort of stuff. Yeah, we can talk about that if you want. So please get your comments in. What's your take on that matter? As you know, I always like to start with a question where possible to get you thinking and get you contributing. So please do let me know as to what you feel is the key thing you've noticed about things, either clinically or yourself. You might be working from home yourself. How has your behavior changed? How has that affected your, say, exercise levels? How much does your posture and position matter? Are you sat at a desk, standing at a desk, mix of both, lying on your bed? How is the fact that many of you homeschooling kids, of course, at the moment? How is that affecting things? How's your routine changed? And how have you noticed it affecting your patients? So I've got a few thoughts myself, but of course, as ever, I'd love to get you guys involved in it. Also, let me know. I noticed that it looks like the signal's on the bit of a blink, so please do let me know if it's sort of intolerable, and I'll try and tweak a few dials. If it's vaguely tolerable, then again, just let me know. But I'd appreciate your support on that, because it just looked like this week we're having those issues. Thanks to those of you that got in touch about yesterday's show with Rob Yeldham about vaccines. It was great to sort of get a lot of your questions out there. So similarly, if you have any other questions, not just on that topic, but broadly, that can generate themes for me to then set up shows and speak to people. If you've got any guests that you want me to talk to, then please let me know. But yeah, really appreciate you all getting involved, both on the live session as well as then submitting the questions ahead of time. So one of the main things I wanted to touch on then with this working from home situation is that first point about it being a relevant difference in how people are living and working at the moment. That seems to be a real central point that I want to make, is that it takes for us to notice that sometimes. Of course, it's kind of obvious that we're all been put into locked into as homes and told to stay home. Then, of course, that's going to change behavior. It kind of doesn't bear repeating. But then the way in which that affects people who are either on furlough or those that are working from home and therefore spending time on their laptops more, and then making adaptations based on that, because then either feeling obliged to, and therefore thinking, I need to make sure that my situation is better, either for concentration reasons, for privacy reasons, for not wanting to have their bookshelf in the background of their Zoom calls. Or it could be that because they've encountered that they've developed some musculoskeletal pain, or noticed things in their health behaviors that they want to make adjustments to, then that's a different thing. But sometimes the solutions that they come to are fairly similar. And I think one motivation is better than the other, is that if you're responding to symptoms, and this goes without saying that I'm talking about you as people, as well as then the patients that you see, is that if you've got someone that's developed some symptoms and wants to modify behaviors around those symptoms because it's something that becomes uncomfortable to the point of intolerable, then I think that that's got some more legitimacy to it than this proactive sense of I need to create some sort of ergonomic environment that therefore puts less stress and strain on various parts of my body as a means of then preventative measures of musculoskeletal pain. So I hope you're following me so far, but it's this idea that there is a perfect position and state for your screen, body, desk, mouse to be in, that then puts optimal forces through the seated body in such a way that therefore it's unlikely to develop any aches and pains, is something that is a bit of an archaic nonsense. To be saying that across the general population with all the great diversity that we have of shape, size, disposition, preference, as well as then the tasks that we're doing, as well as the actual situation that we find ourselves in, squeezed on the end of a dining table whilst noisy kids are playing elsewhere, and various different parents needing to have a quick release on their chair to go and grab said child, versus someone that's able to have a perfect off in a soundproof room in the web of a large house. We know kids' brain at the relevant differences there. The inference, they need exactly the same setup, exactly the same time frames to be seated for the same proportion of their day. I just think I don't see that in health science and clinical analysis in plenty of patients. So about why people do these things, people sometimes feel guilty pursuing those sorts of things. I think that's a problem. I really am for that. Sometimes when people perceive that they come in clinic, I know I shouldn't be working for a couple of months, and I just, it does me more than it should. I just feel like that level of people play is such, because what about that's inherently bad? If not, but this is sometimes then coming in with a bit of a recurrence or irritation, a back pain. They're just even that this is something that they've chosen to do comfortable because they think that's the reason. Fortunately, sometimes it's because some perpetuated that myth to them, and in fact should be using their sofa sparingly. And so the fact that they're then working on said couple of hours each morning, they've then in problem. Invariably, it never. We flag that with right. We get them, but we get them in order to rehabilitate their problem, and then I make sure I flag. We notice that you now don't have the back described when you first came in, yet still doing what caused it. Right, that's not on a basic level. Clearly, there were other factors at play, contributing to some left that alone, and that I always want to try and flag with, because I guilty people is really a poor and something that we need to not be doing. Extension to that is this idea when people are developing simple habits based on some musculoskeletal pain, they feel too set and comfortable, they feel stiff, and they've been sat for too long. So they develop desks or sits and stuff like that. And they diversify the base and they work at slightly different rooms, slightly different proactive. Then that's all. I really think that's decent, fair, but then also need to do is people that are selling desks. It's in their interest sitting. Similarly, those that desks, chairs, screen height, it's in their interest to know even standing. It's not typical, but to infer that those things matter, regardless of who you are, because they're not target marketing there, are they? They're specifically trying to do something that catches all. Trying to make you think, getting conscious of that stuff, really obvious, is going to be your health and evidence to suggest that. So even some bits you can get into, just be mindful that you're not so good reasons for doing so. Perpetuate that either to your patient or amongst them friends when they sound you out. I bet some of you have been that as well. Questions: how should I be? How I stand during the day? Brings me on to the next patients, especially across the board. Are just kind of theme and overindulging on sort of standards, right? So people are coming up with knee pain or hip pain or back pain, whatever it might, shoulder pain, and they say, I've done everything right up to a stand. Like, right, when did you stand in the desk? Have you fought? They say no to those things, and they're seeing out a full working day at a standing desk they sat at, then it's not the cause, but that changing behaviour relevant to some of the aches and pains presenting with, especially on the specific journalist this morning with a little factoid thing in the Times or in the Sunday Times or the or something, asking about how should people advice and not spoken to her plenty of times. She knew, thinking that this year, I love her to bits. She's really smart and their instincts are good on this. Like, right, but let's some specific conditions in which you might want to be mindful. So someone with a glute tendon up for a time to distribute evenly from the side. Similarly, if you've got a fat pad dysfunction of your you might not want to hyperextension for a long period of time. Notice it at the time, but in that structure, it's that latently. Similarly, there might be certain people final posture that they're kind of really swayed back, but then persistent standing for a period of backache might trigger some sciatica, whatever. These individual cases and individual conditions at the very difficult to then analyze. But once you use that as that last example to someone who's got a disposition, they've sitting to standing all day, or sitting and fidgeting for a bit, to just standing all day and thinking that was the devil. Often one of the things I'm do, I'm fidgeting, I'm trying to stand differently, but it's really awkward, it's difficult. You should work on making adjustments to the standing posture. I would say one of the best describing that case is some sitting, and that's sometimes is that they've then gone from sitting all day for all day. That we need to be mindful to not suggest. Fortunately, I've just by Jack March some audio. I was worried about that. So the way signal seems to be so significant, which I do apologise for. So if this show has ended up being too glitchy to be tolerable, then I do apologise. That's something I'm trying to work on and trying to sort out a more stable secondary connection for the practice. So apologies. I'll have a look at the video and audio that comes to this, and to make sure that I can get you a copy of this out, because hopefully it's of interest to you. But apologies if it's something that hasn't really worked out today because of signal. But if you're standing all day and you're not used to doing it, I'm not surprised that you're aching. But is it that you're actually standing badly? That's where it becomes something that I want to be particular on, is that it just doesn't seem that is going to be the position of your standing is going to be as relevant as the sort of dosage and all that sort of stuff. So I would say that you just want to be mindful of that and flag it with your patients and reassure them that they're not doing something inherently badly. Like, you're not standing badly. It's highly unlikely that that's the core variable that's causing the problem. And in patients, that so rarely is. So what I would like to say as well is that people are making decisions on their working from home environments and positions and pains based on a whole host of really unique variables to them. So as part of your subjective, I would suggest that you want to be asking those questions, like where do you set up? How much of your working day is at a screen, but how much of your working day is actually on meetings? Of your meetings, do they have a Zoom policy? Many workplaces doing that now, having a cameras on only policy. In doing so, that sometimes puts pressure on people to be in a certain position and stay in that position for where their house is, for what they're willing to have in the background, as well as then some workplaces mandating that. There's not people walking in and out and being distracted in and out of shots. So then it takes for people to position their laptop in a certain place so that the background is not going to be disturbed. And that means that they might then park themselves on the corner of a bench seat on their dining room table, of which is not good for an hour-long meeting for them. The specifics of that are incredibly relevant. And so you need to tease them out in your subjective history, and you need to be asking questions that you're not used to asking. Make sure that you're not just ticking boxes. Make sure you're not just going through and say, oh, well, tick the box. I asked after, and I put a few little notes in the box about their work history or work situation as part of their social history in that typical box of what your SOAP notes would be. You need to be a bit more thoughtful about that. Dig into it a little deeper, because I think these things matter now more than ever. I think really you should have had the sense to be thorough with your occupational health style history taking anyway as part of your subjective. I think that's more important to most people than people have suggested in healthcare, and more relevant to symptoms and more relevant to behavior change than people have realized. But if you haven't already got into that habit pre-pandemic, then these days, when everyone's locked down, you want to be checking in on that. And you want to be checking in on how they feel it's affected them. For example, so beyond the sort of biomechanics, posture, ergonomics type situation, I want to flag this, which is brilliant, from Ollie Colburn. He said that exercise levels are up because he's had more time, but normal physical activity levels outside of that are way down. Not great from a general health perspective. Now, I don't know if he's meaning then for him personally and making the distinction between exercise levels and physical activity levels, which I think definitely I can relate to. They might also be recognizing that that is a case across societies. What Ollie's describing there is very relevant, is that if someone is someone that does exercise and has their habits involve them exercising solo, bikes, running, that sort of thing, going out for lengthy walks, getting out of breath that way to make sure it constitutes exercise, then the evidence is suggesting that they are doing more. But then if someone's exercise is for them to go to an aqua zumba class that's therefore closed, or they need to have the structure of a gym that's currently closed for them to do the exercise that they would normally do, then we know that that is down. And sometimes the generic exercise amounts is being skewed by people that are doing that bit more, doing 3 times as much as they used to because they've got the time to. But like Ollie's saying, physical activity levels on the whole are going to be down, not just in individual cases, but in the case that we're not walking about and ambling and to and from meetings. We're not going, we're not commuting for those that do have even if I know it sounds silly, but even for people that drive to work, they're often not parking at the front door. Often one of the things that people do that's one of the more active parts of their day is the fact that there's no car parking on site, and so they've got to walk 5 minutes each way. Especially if they're running a little late, they're getting out of breath, getting a trot on to get into the office on time or into the hospital. You can imagine there's no on-site parking for many therapists. It's something or nothing in many ways, but it's relevant to the fact that their day is different, how much they are just generally being active, how many stairs they're climbing in a day, right? Especially people, desk here, downstairs loo there, and they just end up being back to back with meetings or back to back with patients on Zoom or what have you. Then it's going to be a difference. So these are things that are worth, again, just flagging with people and trying to check in with them to see what their circumstances are and how that's relevant. It definitely affects people's exercise and activity levels, does working from home, as well as it throwing off people's motivation. I mentioned at the start of the show, albeit forgive me if the signal was crap. It sounds like it's been a real glitchy show today, so that's a shame. We had a good show yesterday, no problems, especially because I had a guest on, and for some reason now the internet just keeps flashing on and off. So apologies if this has been intolerable. But the psychology piece, the mental health, the general motivation for people to instigate behavior change when we just don't know what the world's going to be like, at what time and what point. Everything's been dragged on. You remember the rhetoric that was from the original lockdown was just that we were going to make sure that we stepped up and locked down initially for a period of weeks in order to just protect the NHS, bolster it, and then move on and move forward. And all the things that happened in the summer where we had glimpses of hope and we were all dining out at restaurants every 5 minutes. These are all things that mean that there's an understandable demotivation for people that feel like they need to wait and see what the world's going to look like for them to try and work out where their place is going to be within it. People are just postponing a lot of plans. Now, one of the things I want to flag there is some of the work that Joe Turner has been doing and flagged on this show. And so keep an eye out on her work. Certainly got a new website coming out, but also a podcast with us called You Matter. But she made a really good point in saying that that's all well and good in the medium term. Everything is quite chaotic. In the moment to moment, you definitely want to be trying to achieve certain goals and hold yourself accountable those ways, but not with any pressure or guilt tripping. But then on the long term, there's no reason why you can't strive to be that person that you want to be or pursue that angle or hobby or what have you. You know, these things are something you definitely want to keep your eye on. And that's something that you want to try and notice in your patients is if they're feeling quite nihilistic about it and quite down about it, you definitely don't want to be just giving them a pep talk and tell them everything's going to be okay, because in that medium term, they're definitely not going to be. Oh, well, I say definitely not. Of course, you don't know. And I don't mean on their symptoms, but I just mean in terms of the fact that they might be reluctant to initiate any sensible behavior change, things that you might be proposing and you would be proposing in normal times. It's relevant that they might just be like, well, we just don't know what the situation's going to be. You know, I can't wait to get back to the gym, but when's that going to be? Everyone's thinking and looking at vaccine schedules and thinking that there's going to be some sort of coherence between lockdown measures lifting and the amount of people being vaccinated, but we're not seeing any coherent public health strategy that sort of suggests that they're going to be doing that as everyone expects them to. So I understand why everyone's feeling a bit down about that. And I think that people need to make sure they cut themselves some slack as well as cut their patients some slack on the fact that now might not be the time for people to make the significant adjustments to their life that might well be the case, that might help them to recover, might help them to be healthier and to initiate better general behavior over their health. That you're recommending as a professional based on your assessment, or that you're noticing in yourself that you should be doing certain things and feel like you should be meeting certain milestones in your health and fitness. But now just is a really funny time in such a way that is relevant. And I just think that people need to cut themselves some slack, cut their patients some slack, but also be a bit more creative about the way in which we goal set on certain topics and tactics, right? And starting to recognize that the chaos that is in amongst people's lives needs to be complied with rather than refined. I think I've heard from a few clinicians that have been struggling in this, reaching out for sort of mentorship advice, etc., that have been struggling to, or thinking it's their job to try and tidy up some of the disorder and chaos that surrounds people's lives and what they're needing to do with their bodies at this moment in time. And I just feel like that is someone that's misunderstanding the social aspect of biopsychosocial. Biopsychosocial, I would say, done badly, is sometimes that a therapist running interference with someone's biology and thinking that they can influence that in a great manner through whatever modality. Psychology is that then essentially you're then interfering in a similar way with someone's psychology and trying to counsel them and trying to make adjustments and interference that would affect someone's symptoms. And then they're making that mistake in a social thing where they're thinking that as a therapist, they're going to be the jobsworth and the busybody that's going to try and tidy up someone's life. And that the social aspect is almost like an inherent, without consent, life coaching to infer that someone needs to do certain things that are going to perpetuate better health behaviors. I think that is, granted, that's too therapist centric for my taste generally, but especially on the social aspect of it, then that is something that is just clumsy interference and something that I definitely would recommend against. Instead, make sure you do what a sensible contemporary clinician would be and do shared decision making, person-centeredness, get all the cards on the table, be thorough with your subjective assessment and analyze their situation in a spirit of non-judgment, and then move forward sensibly with that process. And make sure that you go about things whereby you collaborate and consent them for whatever adjustments you're suggesting to their life in such a way that then you recognize you're saying, I think this would be a good idea, try it, rather than this is a correction of your behavior, this is a correction of your position, this is a correction of your posture, this is, yes, you definitely need to invest in that standing desk because you're sitting badly. You know, we need to just make sure that we're not carrying with it this inference of causation, as well as the judgment that people sometimes feel that they hear from us as clinicians. So anyway, that's enough for me. Really appreciate your time. Many thanks to those that have commented. I've got a few that have come through, but I know that it's been glitchy on this signal. Jim said he's got a new smartwatch and his step count's depressing. Yeah, that's true. I've had a few patients that have said that about their Fitbits. It took for a while for people got Fitbits for Christmas, but it took 2 weeks for them to know if they were working properly. That's what a couple of patients said to me last week. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Really sorry about the signal issues. I am working on those. It does happen occasionally, but in the meantime, I will be seeing you tomorrow for more Chewing It Over.